What's up, everybody? We are here at the Post-Click podcast. I am Kanika Misra. I am the owner of Better Growth, full-service CRO agency, and I am here with my lovely friend.
I am Ryan Doney. I'm the CEO of PageDeck. Excited to bring you a new one today.
Yeah, today we are going to be covering offers, pricing, psychology, and how to kind of bring all those things together to create what could be best for your brand, or at least things that are worth testing. So I'm going to just jump right into it today. No fluff. Let's get into the meat, the potatoes, the good stuff. And what I wanted to talk about was decoy pricing and how that can work, because I've had a lot of these conversations recently. And what I mean by decoy pricing is, when you have one product and people are really not loving the price of it, and maybe you sometimes get some opportunities to offer some bundles. So I'm going to use soap as an example so we can think about it tangibly. So Ryan, you've seen this, I'm sure, right? There's a lot of popular soap brands, and they have on their PDP or on their landing page, they have an offer and it says buy 1 bar, buy 2 bars, buy 3 bars. You've seen that, yeah?
Are you talking about soap because you were looking at Shane Rostad's brand this morning?
No, I'm not talking about it because of Shane. Shane has done some smart things, but what I'm actually picturing in my mind right now when I'm talking about this is Dr. Squatch.
Eh.
Have you seen their PDP recently? They're doing some interesting things too that I know they've done a lot of CRO, so I'm a little confused by it. But what I'm talking about specifically is you can buy, they have these pre-made bundles, right? I think it's 1 bar, 2 bars, 3 bars. I don't know if you're looking at it right now. And the weird part about what they're doing for me last time I looked at it was that regardless of which option you choose, I think it's like $7 per bar, right? So like on each of the options, it says like $7. And then like 2 times 7 is $14. And then 3 times 7 is 21. I don't know if they're still doing it. They were doing it at one point, and it always kind of confused me because I'm wondering, why aren't they using decoy pricing? And what that means is basically, if you want to if you want to persuade people to buy the next tier, because that's probably going to be better for your margins, because it's one bundle that you get 2 products. So just outside of AOV, pick and pack once, hopefully, if you have those bundles made. If you can say, hey, you can buy 1 bar of soap, and that's going to cost $12. But if you buy 2 bars of soap, that's going to cost $15. That's a lot easier for somebody to say, yes, that sounds like a great deal to buy 2 bars of soap, than if you have what Dr. Squatch had, which is you buy 1, $7. If you buy 2, it's $14, right? There's no sort of deal happening in that instance. Another example, maybe an easier example, sock brand I was talking to recently. Supplement brand too. They have 1 pack, 2 pack, 3 pack. So exactly the same concept. 1 pack of socks costs $30. The 2 pack costs $55. 3 pack, whatever, more than that. Contribution margin doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if people just buy 1. But they can make it work, but it's not great. So instead of a 30 and a 55, they should be testing maybe $40 and a 55. Because psychologically, all of a sudden you say, holy crap, I'm going to spend $40 on 1, but I could get 2 for just 15 more bucks. That is decoy pricing. That is the idea of using a almost fake price that's inflated to make the next tier feel a lot cheaper. Have you seen practices of this, Ryan? Is this something that you've ever tried or that you see people doing on PageDeck?
100%. And even talking outside of like the PageDeck specific customers, the biggest brand that I keep coming back to that does this really well is a brand called Magic Mind, where it's less about like the tiered discount quantity offers that you're talking about, but it's single purchase versus subscription. Their buy one-time price is $90. It's $89.25. Their sub and save price is $59.25. So it's like a 35% discount-ish. I have to believe that almost nobody is buying one time, like buying a 12-pack of these little like brain supplement things for $90. They do it really, really effectively. And honestly, I've bought it several times on subscription and canceled it after 1 month every time. It works really
You're
well.
one of those.
What's that?
You're one of those.
Of course I'm one of those. I got to switch between things on a regular basis. But I think that's really powerful because particularly for CPG brands, and Dr. Squatch certainly falls under the same category. It's a powerful needle mover to get people to buy at a higher AOV, right? But I did pull up the Dr. Squatch page after you mentioned this, and it confuses me why they're offering these pre-curated bundles like the buy more, save more thing, but they're on completely different pages. I'm on the 6-pack one right now, and you can see that you're buying more and you're getting like a 14% discount, but you can't directly compare that to the single purchase, the 4-pack, the other thing. So it almost kind of ruins the psychology of it a little bit because you're only looking at one product with one price, as opposed to seeing in all one view, buy 1 for this price, buy 4 for this price, buy 6 for that price. I think that is where this gets really powerful, is when consumers can directly compare the different options right next to each other.
And I think that's a really good segue into price anchoring, because that's exactly what we're talking about, right? Is people like to be able to compare. And if you don't give them an anchor point, they can't do that. Real quick, one last point about the first one that you said. You said, I can't imagine anyone buying just the single, the 12-pack for $90. Well, you know what happens if people do buy that single pack or, the entry pack, whatever we want to call it? They make a pretty penny off of it. So another way just to think about this as a brand owner is beyond the psychological effects of pushing people a little bit upstream to a bigger purchase, make that initial purchase worth it, right? If that one-time purchase is almost like a trial for them anyways, like they don't want to overcommit and buy something more than what they need, make it very worth it for you. You aren't necessarily just trying to get people in the door and break even or just make a tiny margin off of them. You want to either get them in the door and have them stay, and you're confident in that, or if they're just kind of going to try it and they just want to get the lowest possible price, they're probably not coming back anyways. So think about how can you make it the most worth your while while also, hopefully using some psychology in there. All right. So price anchoring. I think a lot of people have probably heard this. If you haven't heard this, the kind of rule of thumb is to always introduce the highest cost options first. So when you're introducing bundles or pre-curated packs like we've been talking about, it often makes sense to start with the $100 pack and then go to the $50 pack and then go to the $25 pack. It makes those lower tier options feel more affordable because first you were hit in the face with something really expensive in your mind. And then you say, oh, okay, you know what? I don't have to spend $100 today. I can spend 50 or 25, whatever it might be. It's a good rule of thumb. And if you're just starting off and you just want to test it out of the gate, yeah, stick with that and see if, the psychology of price anchoring, showing the most expensive thing first, makes people feel like they're getting a deal later. Try it. But that is not a hard and fast rule. Like most things that we say, there's always nuance to it and you have to test it. We've tested this and we've actually seen when it comes to bundles, this is merchandising testing at the end of the day. When it comes to bundles, we've seen low to high work pretty well. And you got to be really careful to make sure that you're calling out those savings. So as the bundles are getting more expensive, hopefully those savings are also getting higher. So in a psychological kind of element of it, they're seeing like, okay, the base price is going up, but I'm saving more money. So just kind of talking about the fear of loss is greater than the excitement of gain for consumers. That's a good thing to try too. Ryan, I know that you guys do a lot of upsells and bundles and offer testing through PageDeck and on your landers. What do you see that works well? What kind of advice do you give people?
Yeah, specifically, even before we go into the nitty gritty of bundles and upsells, with what you're talking about with price anchoring, we do plenty of tests where the opposite outcome ends up winning, where you're showing the lower price product first. And I think I have no data to support this other than like anecdotal. So take this for what it's worth. But I think it's largely a demo question because the example I'm thinking of, apparel brand sells to mostly blue collar, middle of America people. If you hit them with a really, really high priced product out of the gate, a lot of the time it's just not super palatable for them when they could go to Walmart and get something that's much, much cheaper that, fundamentally does kind of the same thing. But what they're doing that's really smart is you hit their collection page. A lot of their traffic goes to the collection page. You get the first item on the list, top left, is a bundle that is kind of like their all up best deal. I think it's up to 40% off where they're, it's an over $100 AOV for this bundle. You get six different products. Immediately after, you get the single purchased prices for each individual product in that bundle. So you can see all in the same view. You see a grid of 4 products with something really expensive, but with a lot of value in it. And then immediately, like one pane over from that, you get the individual products, and you can see that they're premium and the price is not super cheap, but you're not shocking them with, oh, does this brand only carry $100+ products? And am I going to get scared off? Same goes with presenting subscription versus one-time purchase for CPG brands. A lot of the time people default to having subscription selected by default. And the best practice, common knowledge with that is going to convert better. It's going to give you more purchases on subscription. But maybe you're scaring away more people because you're asking people to get locked into a subscription. So I think that is an incredibly worthwhile test, is thinking about how you're merchandising those products. And especially for cold customers coming in, what are they seeing first? And what does that say about the rest of your stuff in your catalog? Because you can't totally scare people away if they're totally cold. Maybe the bundle makes sense, but maybe they just need to try something out first.
Yeah, I think you bring up 2 really good points. Is one, you don't need to price anchor with the exact same product. That's such a good point you just made. You can price anchor with a bundle. And the exact example you used is, here's all these things together and here's a great price for it. If you just buy one thing out of it, in a really similar sense of just comparing the same item in multiple quantities, you can compare it as separate items versus the big bundle price. So I love that. That's definitely something that's worth trying for people who sell apparel or things that can, come together in a really nice package. The second thing that you made me think of was mobile view is very important to think about. And that's also where we have seen success with kind of going the other way, and why people have to test it is, to your point, if the very first option they see is so expensive, depending on how you have it laid out on mobile, they might just scroll only until that first option. And we see that really often. It's also why sometimes the most expensive price can work, because they only scroll to the most expensive one. But in that instance, it's not really price anchoring anymore. It's just, what does the customer see first? So make sure that as you're building out your pages, as you're building out these offers, you think about that whole experience and exactly how people are going to interact and in what order they're going to see content, because then you throw out the psychology, right? There's no psychology there except for, well, that's too expensive for our target demo. That's just not going to work for them.
Yeah. For that exact reason, if I could only have one report for optimizing like any page, landing page, collection page, homepage, it would be scroll depth. Like people, when you're building out these pages and trying to make like a super engaging experience and putting tons of content here, tons of content there, you just don't know what people are actually seeing. And at the end of the day, those are the only things that people are going to interact with. And there have been so many times that I've jumped into heat maps and looked at a brand's stuff and people are getting 30% down the page. Like I feel like 30% just, again, anecdotally, ends up being like a pretty common like 50% scroll depth drop-off point. So yeah, that's a super important thing to think about when you're merchandising your products and when you're thinking about price anchoring. Because you're right. If all they see is the super high price bundle and they see nothing else, that's what they're going to remember you for.
100%. And I love you bringing up scroll maps. We'll do that in another episode, kind of more in depth, but we do so much qualitative analysis, and scroll depth, click maps, all of those are so important. But I would agree with you. Scroll maps are so interesting because I would even say that a lot of them that we look at, when they get to PDPs especially, they're getting like 20% down the page, meaning that they're basically just seeing that buy box. And so a lot of the time, one of our very first initiatives is to better hook them towards the top of the page so that they can be anchored somewhere, not price anchoring, but physically anchored somewhere else on the page, and it'll bring them down to that spot so they can get educated, because no one is going to buy something if they are not educated. So a lot of the myths of CRO come from the idea that it's enough for people to just see price and a few pictures and make a purchase. Instead, you have to educate them properly. And that comes down to understanding, are they seeing any of this stuff right now, or is it all hidden?
Probably not seeing as much as you think they're seeing. That'll be a really good episode. Just talking about even just PDPs and click maps on PDPs. There's so much that you can do just in the buy box above the fold, but we'll save that for another day. Let's talk about upsells and bundles. And I want to start with kind of how I think about using the two together. Because oftentimes, especially when people are coming in as customers on PageDeck, they want to know how to plug in their upsell funnel into all of their landing pages. And a lot of the time, I encourage them not to, for two reasons. One, we have found that pretty consistently when you're driving paid traffic to a landing page, a PDP, whatever it is, getting your offer down to just one offer, like put a pre-curated bundle, pre-curated offer in one buy box, in one view, it ends up converting better and netting you a higher revenue per session than having a lower price purchase in your buy box, in your PDP, and then asking them to decide whether or not to claim an upsell. And then they get to the cart and you decide to ask whether you're going to claim another upsell.
Can you illustrate an example so I can visualize this in my head?
Yeah. So think about side one, that is, you get to a PDP, you're buying a pair of socks. You click yes. Then you get hit with an upsell in the cart. Do you want to buy more socks? You decide yes or no. Then you get to the checkout, you get an order bump that says, do you want to buy another pair of socks in a different size or style? Yes or no. That becomes 3 or 4 or 5 different buying decisions. And that customer might get fatigued from having to make so many decisions when you're already asking them to pull out a credit card and pay you. As opposed to, if you can wrap up all of that, if you can wrap up all those different products into one bundle and test sending people to the bundle versus sending people to just the normal product, a lot of the time you get much better results by getting people to claim the pre-curated bundle. So one decision, it's in one place, and you can visually show what they get and what the value is, as opposed to kind of breaking it up into so many different steps.
I love that. That is such a good way to think about it. And I don't even think that people can separate those in their mind the way that you just did, because you often are like, hey, I have all these products. They could all sell individually. I generally do sell them individually. And then sometimes people will buy something extra and they'll just add this on. And maybe I could just prompt them to do that. But with what you're saying is, yeah, you could take those extra steps to see if maybe they add some extra stuff there. You could create some analysis paralysis by adding a million, pop-ups and decisions. Or why don't you just see if people are going to buy the curated bundle right out of the gate? That really simplifies things. And that's a fantastic kind of first test that you can run. And what I'll add to that is it doesn't mean that you need to stop offering just the single product, right? And I don't think that you mean that either, Ryan. It's more like, hey, why don't you see how it does? And then you craft the rest of your strategy around what is the percentage of traffic or people or spend that you can put towards the bundle versus, a hero product or individual products. So Ryan, if somebody were to say, great, I love that idea. I've done my bundle testing and my PDP testing for a single product, and the bundle did great. But I also still have this percentage of people that like to just buy the single product. How do you start thinking about breaking out those campaigns, or what would be that next test after the bundle, I guess is the main question.
It's such a good question because it's so brand dependent. How big is your SKU list? What other products do you have? And how much do those other products apply to the same customer? A lot of the time, I think the customer that's going to buy the, $100 bundle is different than the one who's going to buy the single purchase $30 product. So at a certain point, you're kind of beholden to what's possible technically. I think on Shopify, for example, if you are driving people to a PDP that is for a bundle product, they're going to see your in-cart upsells. They're going to see all of your other upsells. You can set it up in such a way where you can take them away, but that's probably leaving money on the table because maybe there's some long tail of customers that are still going to claim your upsell with the bundle. Who knows? So at the end of the day, I would think about it in terms of driving people to your most profitable product, your highest revenue per session product. And in this case, you say it's the bundle. Great. In that case, I think make sure that you've curated your upsells properly, in as much as you're not just putting it into the upsell app wizard that's going to just randomly generate upsells on every product. What you don't want is for people to claim the bundle product, then get into the cart and see the bundle product for 20% off. That completely cuts your legs out from under you. Don't do that. So I think kind of a happy medium is have your bundle product. Great, it works. And then make sure that your upsells for every step, and we'll talk about every step, are curated in such a way where it's not showing the same product. And ideally it's showing products that are complementary. Maybe it's something that's not in the bundle.
I love that. And this actually brings up a conversation we had with a client recently. Say that we have the bundle set up and, it's going great. And now I'm still wondering about my other upsells and offers and cross sells, all of that good stuff. I know what our answer is when people ask, but what is your answer if they say, okay, great. Where should I start with my upsells? What should I do first? How do you typically answer that question?
Yeah. If we assume that the places you can put your upsells are embedded on your product page, like maybe below the buy box, something like that. One-click upsell, Zipify, like everyone's seen it. Like the pop-up that comes up after you add something to cart, then in your cart, then in your checkout, and then post-purchase. Almost always, I'll recommend people start with post-purchase because at that point, someone's already put in their credit card, they've hit the buy button, you're getting something out of them. So those upsells aren't going to meaningfully increase or decrease your conversion rate on orders. But any take rate you get on your post-purchase upsells is just a bonus. You can show it no matter what, and people are going to still get their order. Free money. It's as close to free money as there is in e-commerce. So that's great. I think I would start with post-purchase, and then I would do in-cart. I do not recommend people start with checkout order bumps. And in my world, you need to be on Shopify Plus anyways. So at that point, you're probably a little more advanced. But putting things into the checkout that give people other decisions to make when they're almost ready to make a purchase can be really risky, we've found. So in order, start with post-purchase, then do in-cart, and then do your sort of PDP, one-click upsell, that type of thing. Leave your checkout upsells for last.
I like it. And I think to add to that, I fully agree with post-purchase. If you don't have post-purchase set up now, just do it, because exactly what Ryan said, you're not going to hurt your conversion rate. And anything that you do get is just a little cherry on top, right? You can take anything there and it's just a little bit of an added bonus. One thing that comes up is people unfortunately often think about which products they want to move rather than thinking about the full user journey. So we've worked with folks and they say, oh, this is a pretty low cost item. I think it would be easy because it's a low cost item and we have a lot of inventory. So I'd love to move it. Don't do that. I just don't recommend it, because instead you need to think about, where do I get most of my volume? In this case, if you're just setting up an upsell product that is a bit random, it doesn't really go together with your main products that you sell, that's going to be so confusing for a user, right? Like if I buy a hat, no, I don't also want a pen. Like that's so weird. It's such an awkward combination. So make sure you're thinking about, how do these things go together rather than just, what you want to move in terms of inventory. And then kind of the initial point is, if you don't have enough volume, actually buying that initial product, it's not going to do much for you. Sure, it's low risk, so does it really matter? I guess not, but you're not going to make any money off of that. Main point, don't use the defaults. Think about that full user journey. What are they buying? What goes well with it? And then, of course, what kind of percentage off or dollar value off can you offer them, which still makes sense with your, pick and pack, your margin, all that good stuff.
Yeah. And to that end, I mean, a lot of the time, the post-purchase offer that works the best is, do you want another one for a little bit of a discount? Because you can think about it in such a way that your CAC is already baked into the original purchase that they've made. Like from a contribution margin standpoint, whether or not you can afford someone to buy that product in the way that they've gotten there from paid social, whatever it is. So maybe you can offer them another one at a slightly deeper discount that you'd be comfortable with just offering to anyone on the main site. Because again, it's free money. They've already bought something. That's not as simple as that in real terms, obviously, but a lot of brands think about it that way. Like, we already got them. We already acquired them. Can we afford to give them another product at a slightly deeper discount to incentivize them to, basically upgrade to a higher AOV?
Agreed. One thing I want to call out, you just made me think of sort of a weird case. So I don't know how often it'll apply, but it's something really important to think about. The reason that I mentioned pick and pack was we worked with this great client once, and they have standalone offers. They have, add-ons that go really well with those standalones. And then they have full bundles, and you can either buy these standalones or these add-ons, or you can buy those bundles. And what we didn't realize initially was we didn't have their COGS. Naturally, it makes sense to have that base product. And then as that post-purchase upsell, we're going to give them those add-ons. Duh, that's such a, at a great price. And that price could be the same as what they pay for the bundle. So it just feels psychologically like they're getting a good deal, even though really at the end of the day, they're just paying the same, maybe even a little bit more than they would have had they chosen pre-curated bundle right out of the gate. Here's why you need to make sure that you check your COGS and your pick and pack and all your numbers before you choose these offers. In their case, they had to pay 2 pick and pack fees for the base product and then the add-on, versus with just the pre-curated bundle, they had 1 pick and pack fee. And so that profit was actually much smaller for the 2, like the add-on product sold separately, than with the singular bundle, even though that take rate was really great, right? So we were incentivizing and successfully incentivizing something that didn't make them as much money. So make sure that when you think about upsells, you think about the full journey and fulfillment and what those costs look like. Because from a high level, if you don't know those operating back-end costs, it seems like you're doing great, but you might be costing yourself more money than you need to or that you should be.
It is such an important point, and every single person listening who owns a brand should re-listen to that last 3 minutes. I've only ever run into it once with a client where shipping costs were really high. They were tacking on upsells, and the upsells were eating into their margin on those orders. So it's really, really important to know your numbers.
And it's sometimes insane. Like, we were shocked actually by the difference in COGS and how much was added for what feels like such a small little pick and pack. Like, it can be shocking, and your 3PLs are going to do what your 3PLs do, but make sure you run those numbers because it can look so awesome. We were so pumped about it initially until I just had that thought and said, hey, can we get those COGS so we can really do the math for you on what this is doing? We're like, oh my God, we're selling the same thing for $3 more. That's awesome. It wasn't so awesome, unfortunately.
Actually, we've talked about pre-curated bundles a ton. It would just kind of put that as a given that is what most brands are offering. And I don't think it's the case. Like, a lot of people want to do a build your own bundle type of experience. What has your experience been with running that type of offer, Kanika?
Yeah, I think that this is a great topic. I'm glad that you brought it up. BYO, build your own bundle. It's just a lot of friction for a first time purchase. For a new customer, they don't really know you. They don't really know what they want. They don't really know what goes well together. So although it's a nice way to think about things, and it can work for some brands, mind you, where it's very preference based. So for example, flavors, sometimes those can be tricky. Sometimes, build your own bundle works. But in almost all cases, even that one, even flavors, there's a pre-curated solution that's going to make it easier for the customer. It's going to be better from a technical standpoint, which I'm sure you could talk about way more than me. And it's going to be a faster conversion. So, my point about flavors, where it's like, oh, maybe it's selling coffee. That's the example that comes to my mind. You're selling coffee and you're selling a bundle, and either I can enter a funnel that says, choose your flavors. You get 4 of them and they have 10 different flavors. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll choose my bundle. But at the same time, you could just make a bunch of permutations and offer a bunch of pre-curated bundles. And that could be easier for me than just considering all of my options. So TLDR, usually pre-curated is better than BYO. How do you approach this? And also, how do you think about it, not only from a decision-making standpoint, but also from a technical standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, from a technical standpoint first, it's really difficult, I think, to get a build your own bundle experience, like looking good, snappy, functioning well, especially if you have subscriptions to like kind of mix into it and decide like, what does that look like? Do they get rebuy on all the products or some of the products? It can get really hairy. And the hard part is some brands do it really well. And a lot of brand owners want to say like, hey, I saw this bundle builder. It's really awesome. I want to build this. But then you're going to get into like a 3-month dev project because you tried like 3 different apps and all of them sucked. None of them worked well. So I would say there's pretty big opportunity cost to building that functionality into your site. Again, it's not to say it can't work, but just know that going in, like to make it function the way you really want it to, it's going to take some work. I really am struggling to think of any brand that I've looked at that their build your own bundle experience outperformed the curated experience. Like almost always there is like this 80-20 of, in your example, like the top 3 flavors that people buy. So if instead you have in your, in your SKU list, a sampler pack, bestsellers pack, something like that, that just kind of covers most of the use case. It's going to simplify your fulfillment. It's going to simplify the customer experience. And it's just probably going to work better, especially for acquisition. So I just always push people towards pre-curated because of that simplicity, both for the customer decision-making standpoint and just operationally. Like, again, if you have a build your own bundle thing and you're then picking and packing 7 different things, takes longer, costs more. I just feel like it makes a lot more sense to try the pre-curated thing at least. And then maybe down the line, if you want the build your own thing as like maybe a retention play, like you have really dedicated customers who have reordered 3, 4, 5 times. Maybe they want to be able to customize everything because they already know what they're getting. They already know the brand. They know the flavors. It can make a lot of sense then. Maybe, but probably not.
So many good points. I think the next time somebody comes to me for a bundle builder app recommendation, I'm just going to point them towards that little clip, because not only from an analysis paralysis standpoint is it so important to give them pre-curated, but I think even more, everything else that you just said is extremely important, especially when it comes to back-end fulfillment. You can just use your data, right? What you said, see what people are buying already, make those into the pre-curated bundles. And like we said, the theme of almost every single episode that we do, it's a cost-benefit analysis. And if you find that 80% of people are either buying this combo, or this combo, then is that 20% or probably even lower? There's probably like a 5%, a single-digit number of people who are doing something different. When does that start making sense? That's how you can make that decision. But figure out your costs and figure out ease and really prioritize for that before you start getting crazy and things.
We're going to keep this podcast just because you help my ego. Thank you. I want to ask you about pricing psychology because you have thought more about this than anyone else I know. You've talked about it more than anyone else I know. And I come to you with these questions often. So I want to just like give you the floor for a minute. How do you think about this? How do you approach it with new brands?
Every single brand, every single operator should go read about consumer psychology in some way or another. And not only when it comes to pricing, when it comes to offers, when it comes to everything you're doing, right? I said previously in another one of our episodes, if you don't feel comfortable promoting and trying to get people to do what you want them to do, you're in the wrong game. So you should spend time learning how to do that. My favorite book to do that, and it's one of these back here, is Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And it is a heavy book in terms of cognitive load. Like I had to read the same number of pages 10 times before I would get it, but it helps so much in everything that you're going to do for acquisition. When it comes to pricing, when it comes to offers, when it comes to figuring out how to present what you have in front of people. I did a full super deep dive on this a few years ago. So if you want to check out me where I break down different tests and, studies that were done in depth, go check out my YouTube channel. It's just at Kanika Misra. And this video is probably 4 years old now, but the title has something like pricing psychology in it. So check that out if you want to go really deep into it. But the few things I will mention today that are pretty easy, and I cover it in that video as well, is one is charm pricing. So this is one of those kind of silly things that no one thinks works, but there has been a lot of data, a lot of studies that have supported this over the years. And charm pricing is basically the idea that when you price something that ends in a 9, it feels significantly cheaper than something that ends in a 0. So because of, it's called left digit bias. So our brains focus on the first number. So even if something is, $79.99, our brains, and my husband does this constantly, our brains round that down to $70, right? Versus $80. Psychologically, $79.99 feels way cheaper, $10 cheaper than $80, 80.00. And even though it's a 1 penny difference, that gap feels enormous. So if you are in an industry where pricing hesitation is real, you're not necessarily trying to position yourself as a super luxury brand, then you should test having 99 at the end of your prices instead of, $30, $40, $50. It makes people feel like it is more tangible and attainable for them. On the other side, though, there's luxury brands. And for luxury brands, ending in a zero is actually seen as more clean. It's seen as more luxury. It's seen as something that is more kind of aspirational. So you don't want people to necessarily think of all your prices as more attainable. You want to have that sort of polished feel to it. So if you're a luxury brand, you're not going for discounted. You're not going for people to say, oh yeah, that's affordable. You're going for people to say, one day I can get that, right? That's a positioning thing. That's a brand play. If that's the case, I don't recommend charm pricing. I don't recommend ending in 99. Keep your numbers clean, keep it in a zero, keep it more polished, because you want to have that overall psychological impact of being more luxury, more pricey.
It's so interesting because I feel like we take that for granted. Like everyone's so used to walking into a store and seeing every price end in 99. But if every big brand on the planet does it, it probably works.
It's true. I would love to. I am not a shopper at Gucci and these super luxury brands, Armani, maybe I'm not even getting into true luxury, but I would love to know if they're all using this type of pricing from, I think even just looking from like a Prada website, I'm pretty sure on their site, if there are any prices, they do end in 00, but it's something to be careful about is we do take it for granted. So don't take it for granted in your own pricing by accident and align yourself to the wrong side of the coin when it's not really your brand. Like if you're selling tent, outdoor camping stuff, you don't really need to be super luxury. So don't say that things, even if it is $100, even if it is expensive, that doesn't mean you need people to psychologically make it feel expensive, make it feel more attainable. Couple other things to think about when you are putting together your pricing strategies and how you're displaying things. Free is obviously a very big word. It's something that people love to hear. Anything free, people do stuff just because it's free, right? So be careful, but also know its power. Also realize that you can mix and match your offering in ways that will position it differently, and that's what you should test. So for example, say that you have an offer and you're offering a free backpack, free shipping, and free stickers. Instead of saying, buy this bundle of books and you're going to get a free backpack, free stickers, and free shipping, you can mix and match those messages. So you could instead say, buy this bundle, get shipping for $1, and then get the sticker pack for 50% off and then free whatever. So it's a very high level example, but you can understand what I'm saying, where you can have one singular offer and you can offer multiple things within that. You can position it differently so it hits differently. So even otherwise, maybe you have a BOGO, buy one, get one free. Can you position that into buy this for $5 and then get this for $2? I don't know. I should do the math before I use these examples. How can you differently position what you're offering people so that it feels different? And then you can tap into that psychological effect, right? What feels better for people? Is it paying $1 for shipping and getting all this other stuff for free? Is it paying $2 to get these things and then getting free shipping? What combination of those things that ultimately add up to the same dollar amount actually makes people feel like they're getting a good deal? So think about that and test just the positioning of your offers. It's the same base stuff, just say it differently. And then the last thing, I think a lot of people know this, but just in case you don't, when you're giving dollar amounts or percentages off, choose the larger number. So say that you are choosing between 15% off, but that actually ends up being $50 off. Which one should you choose? Choose the 50, because that feels more tangible. It's easy to understand. So dollar amounts, when it's the same thing, also go dollar amounts, but 15 versus 50, simple. Choose larger number. If it's 10 versus 10, percentage, 10% off versus $10 off, choose the dollars, because that is more tangible. It's very easy for people to understand. 10% math, right? In that example, it'd be $100, but still math. Just tell them $10 off, and that makes it easy for them to understand. Quick tips. Hopefully they help you. Test these things, but these are very easy, simple ways to use user psychology, customer psychology, to persuade people to make decisions a little bit more easily, to feel a little bit better about handing you their credit card and giving you their hard-earned cash.
Last one in particular is so good because that's always the question. Like if you're doing a strike-through price with details on what the discount is, people always ask, like, do I show flat amount off versus percentage? Like, perfect, choose a larger number. The one thing that I'll add, and it's simple because I have read Persuasion. Well, I've read the first third of Persuasion 3 times and haven't gotten through the full thing because it's a very dense book. So I'm not nearly as up on this as you are. But for brands who can, I think it is incredibly useful to break down your price into a price per serving, price per unit, price per day, something like that. Supplement brands, CPG brands, even if you're like, if you are an apparel brand selling something higher quality and you're trying to compare the price versus, this is going to last 5 years as opposed to buying 5 different hoodies that last a year in the meantime. Doing it in a price per use way is really, really powerful. Like this bottle of supplements is $50. It's $135 per serving. And all of a sudden people are like, okay, $1 a day, I can do that.
100%. And to add on to that, if you don't necessarily have a serving, if you are selling a product that isn't necessarily supplement or CPG, you can also break down those units into savings of time, for example. So if you have something that is going to save people 20 hours a week, great, that's a savings. You don't have to say dollar savings, you can say another benefit savings. So time, cost, those things can always be used and put into context for people and help sell.
Don't make people think.
Everything you do, make it dummy proof, make it easy, make it clear. And that's it. That's our podcast.
The Public Podcast. We'll see you in the next one.